And we are back. Hi, everybody. John Adams here with my very special guest, Cheryl Nydam. How do you pronounce your last name, Cheryl?
You got it, John.
Nydam. Okay. What if you had a boring name like Adams, you'd really appreciate Nydam. But anyway, Cheryl Nydam is here from the National Tenant Network, Georgia. And in fact, along with her is my evil twin, Ian Robbins, who is chairman of or president of that's a little French for those of you from Loma Linda, California. Ian is eternal chair. Ian got so embarrassed he had to leave, Cheryl. Look at that. Oh, no, he's back.
He disappeared himself.
He did. He's back, and I appreciate it. Ian is chairman of the subgroup, the landlording subgroup at Georgia RIA, which meets about once a month, and sometimes they're on Zoom, and sometimes they're in person. But you can find out more by going to GAREIA.org and looking for that. And you can find out more about Cheryl by going to ntnonline.com and then /Georgia. Is that right?
That sounds right.
Wow. I was worried about that, but I'm glad I got that over with. We are here today to talk about some tenant screening tips. And I've put together a few here, but as those of you who regularly watch and or listen to this program know, Ian and I have disagreements from time to time based on our experiences. And Cheryl has been with National Tenant Network for how long now? You assist landlords in screening tenants. Tell us a little more about National Tenant Network.
Sure. We are a full-service tenant screening company. We are franchised, so we have offices throughout the country. My dad actually started the Atlanta franchise in 1994.
Wow.
And I started working for him in 1995. And actually bought the business from him in 2015. So since 2015, it's been my baby. We've expanded to the whole state of Georgia. Good. So we can help landlords throughout the states check out the applicants for their rental properties.
That's terrific, because we do have listeners and viewers all over the state, and we're starting to expand into some other ones. So there's some opportunity there. And let me do this. I'm just going to share screen, and we're going to go to the slides, and let's just go through these and talk about them. Let's see. This will be screen number 2, and there it is. And now I can click on present, and hopefully that's a full screen. Does that? And I think all three of us are still on here. This is great. This is like how it's supposed to work. So. Cheryl, I took the liberty of creating a slide in case people want to get in touch with you.
Thank you, John.
Is that a good phone number? 770-517-3456. And that's the easiest way to reach Cheryl. But there's also email, if you'd like, NTN, which sort of stands for National Tenant Network, then the word Georgia at ntnonline.com. And one of the things Ian told me about National Tenant Network is they're capable, they're knowledgeable, and they're extremely helpful. Ian, chime in here. You've been working with Cheryl and with NTN for some time.
I sure have, John. And I would just rather start out and say I didn't know what I was doing. And Cheryl, with a lot of diplomacy and knowledge, really got me on the right track. And I so much appreciate that. It kept me out of a lot of trouble.
Can I just say that you guys are making me blush with all your compliments. Thank you so much. I appreciate that very much.
All right. Well, the check's in the mail. So
very true.
There we go.
Somebody helps you say the right things, get it down to a science and a pattern, that's very, very important to keep me focused.
Well, Ian, it's interesting you say that, because you and I have talked about the importance of having, you said the word pattern, and I'm just, we've talked about it, but having repeatable policies so that you're treating people the same, regardless of where they come from or what their characteristics are. If everybody gets treated the same, then we're likely to have fewer problems with one person or another saying they've been somehow treated inappropriately. So let's dive right in here. And I have interspersed this with a few of my favorite quotes. This is one that Ian reminded me of from one of my favorite trainers, John Schaub. Ian, what does John Schaub teach us?
He teaches us to teach your tenants, or your tenants will teach you.
Yikes. And I think he's exactly right. I don't know how many people start off as a landlord, and I did, thinking, I'll just be nice to everybody. That works for about 15 minutes. And I'll never forget when I was taught a lesson by my tenants. And since then, I have had to adopt policies and procedures and learn a lot more about it. But let's dive in with number one, and I'll take the liberty of reading the headlines, and then I'd like you guys to comment on it if you would. Develop written qualification criteria and then document those. What do you think, Cheryl?
Absolutely. That's the first thing we recommend. And that helps the landlord decide exactly what they're looking for, because it's hard to find what you don't even know you're looking for. So we suggest, and we've actually got a little form that we give to our landlords that talks about sample rental criteria, helps define what you're looking for, and more importantly, lets your applicants know what you're looking for, because you never want to tell someone to apply or not apply. You want to tell them what you're looking for, and they can decide for themselves whether or not they believe they meet your qualifications and choose to apply. This way, they've made that decision, because it's really important that you don't want to discriminate against anyone, either inadvertently or deliberately. Right. And this way, if you tell them what you're looking for, they can decide if they meet that.
And I had written down here that it needs to be race neutral, gender neutral, disability neutral, familial status neutral. I always make fun with Ian and say, I always put in my ads, I do not accept applicants from Mars. And so far I haven't had one, although with this new space probe, we may have one any day now. But we just need, I think we've gotten to a point, at least most of us have in this country, where we all recognize that we're all equal. And at least in the sight of the law, we certainly are. And we cannot say things like, we don't rent to people from Iowa, or we don't rent to people from another part of the world. We don't rent to people who happen to be, disabled or whatever. That's not good business. It's not smart. And we don't want to be seen that way. So I like the idea of having this written criteria, and I think that makes good sense. Let's move on. Verify income sources. Ian, why is this important?
Well, we work so hard to find a house, fix up a house, and now we need to make sure that the person that lives in the house can pay the rent.
Absolutely. And Cheryl, have you ever come across an applicant who has somehow used something like Photoshop or some other software to create a fake pay stub?
Oh, on a daily basis, John. Unfortunately, that's really become a challenge right now. Identity theft and fraud are huge. we see it literally every day. And if you're not careful and don't know what you're doing, you're going to get taken advantage of.
Well, and I think this is symptomatic, correct me if I'm wrong, of just the state of the art of computers today. It is so easy, and I'm no computer guru. Please don't make a mistake. But even I can do some basic graphics, and it's just not that hard to make some changes. I saw a credit report the other day that looked absolutely 100% like it was from Equifax. And guess what? It was totally bogus. The people had gone in and changed all of the data. So,
which is why you don't take credit reports from your applicants.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What do you, Cheryl, what do you think of the idea of requesting 2 or 3 months of bank statements as well as maybe your pay stubs?
I think it's great because you can correlate those two things. You can look at the amount, you can look at the date of the check, and then you can check the bank statement to see if that amount was deposited from that source on that day. It makes it much harder for people to be deceptive. They don't think through the entire process.
Well, as a young man, I remember cheating on an application. And when they called me on it and said, well, you said you got a paycheck here, but you didn't, it doesn't show up in your bank account. I said, that was the night I got drunk and went fishing. I stayed out all night, spent all my money and lost it to Ian Robbins, who is now a successful real estate investor. Look at him grinning over there. So, all
John,
right.
I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but there are companies now, credit repair companies out there that promise to help applicants not only clean up their credit, but to generate these fake landlord references and fake employment references. So you've really got to be on your toes.
And tell me if I'm right or wrong. I heard about at least one and maybe more that will give you what they call a credit privacy number, or CPN, to theoretically replace your social security number, and it conveniently has 9 digits. And so somebody like you and me on the receiving end of the applications, it's 9 digits, just put it in the computer. I'm assuming when, Cheryl, when you go to check that social security number, nothing comes back. Is that correct?
It depends on how long the person has been doing it for. But yes, there are telltale signs in terms of addresses that appear, composition of accounts that appear. There are ways to look at a credit report and determine whether it's likely that the person is trying to hide something.
Wow. I will just say as a matter of interest, when I graduated from Emory University, Harvard of the South, I just sort of, that slips right out of my mouth, as did Dr. Ian Robbins here a few years later. I worked for Equifax for a short period of time, about a year, and it was a world of difference from today. We actually, believe it or not, Cheryl, when I was there, we had manual bureaus.
Okay.
We would go to the file cabinet, open N for Nydam, and go through and look for Cheryl and pull out the manila envelope. That's how old I am. So things have really changed. Let's talk about this, because we don't want to break any laws when we're verifying somebody's application. But Cheryl, is it okay or wise for us to at least look at social media and see if the applicant has a presence on social media?
Here's the problem with that, John. I'm not a fan. And the reason for that is, first off, multiple people can have the same name. And so you can't really be sure that the information you're looking at belongs to your applicant. Also, there's no accuracy check. So if your friends posted, hey, how'd you enjoy the jail cell last night? They could be punking you. But if a landlord saw that, suddenly they believe that you've got a criminal history. So you've got to be really, really careful. As a consumer reporting agency, we don't do that. Now, as an individual landlord, it's human nature. You want to know as much as you can. I'm not saying that people don't do that, but it's really a bad policy to get into.
Well, and I was sort of suspicious of that because, as you say, almost anybody could go in and open an account and claim they were somebody else and put anything up there they wanted. One of the things that I did add here is that we have been subscribing to benverified.com for several years. I think it's $5 a month. It is amazing the amount of information. I don't know where these people get it, but just as an example, I looked up Rudy Giuliani the other day, and I found where his apartment is on the Upper East Side in New York. I mean, it's really scary how much information is out there. So I guess you have to be really careful with it, and that's good advice. All right, well, let's forge ahead. Why would we contact two previous landlords? Why isn't it enough just to call the last guy?
What we suggest is 2 years, be it one landlord or 5 landlords, depending on how, what you find when you start to do your investigation. Obviously, if the current landlord is trying to get rid of somebody, they might give you an overly positive, glowing report. However, if you've done your due diligence, if you've checked to see if there's ever been any dispossessories filed against the person, and dispossessories are the court actions that a landlord would file if they have some sort of tenancy problem, not necessarily late rent. It can be any sort of lease violation. So if they've had to go to court and then they start giving you a glowing reference, if you're doing your due diligence, you already know about those dispos because they're public record. So in that case, you would call them on it. And, it is a good idea if you can get more than one, but if somebody's had good rental history for several years and there have been no dispossessories, management companies change ownership, people lose their records. Sometimes it's hard to go back too far.
Well, I have to just tell you from my perspective as a landlord, if somebody contacts me, even with a signed consent form, I say our policy is that we're not able to disclose that information. And the reason is I don't want to get sued. I mean, that may sound paranoid, but I can foresee a scenario where a tenant finds out that they were denied on an application because of information I provided, and then they haul me into court and want me to prove what I said was true. I just don't want to go there. So
I understand that, but the reality is if you base your comments on facts, not personal opinion, rent was late X number of times, right. Unauthorized pets, there was this amount of damage when they left. If it's documentable facts, I mean, as you well know, I'm sure anyone can sue anyone for anything.
That is true.
So if you've got your facts.
I was thinking about suing Ian for that blue shirt.
I like his blue shirt, John.
But it's really blue. It is giving me emotional distress looking at that blue, and I want damages. So, all right. Well, two years. I like Cheryl. I like your idea better than this one. Here's a great quote that we use a lot on the real estate coffee break. And I'm just going to throw it out there because if you don't find a way to make money while you sleep, you will work until you die. Once I found out that was the case, I said, holy moly, I got to find a way to make some money while I sleep. And real estate has worked for me in that regard. And part of the success I think Ian has had and I have had is we try to surround ourselves with a team of professionals. Cheryl, tell me about your staff and some of the things they do for landlords.
Oh my gosh, we've got some great people working for us. We've got Tamara, who's been with us for 18 years. We've got Erin, we've got Denise, we've got my husband, Tom, who is actually running reports even as we speak. And we are always available by phone. That's one of the things that really sets us apart. Anybody can go online nowadays and get a credit report.
Sure.
But if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't have a procedure in place to make those phone calls and send those emails and faxes that those employers and landlords require nowadays, you're missing information.
Yep.
And that information is going to cost you in the long run.
Well, we don't want that to happen. So how about number 5, run a background check on each adult applicant? What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. We recommend everyone 18 years and older be a party to the lease because they're legal adults. If we've had people say to us, well, I'm just going to do the husband because the wife isn't working. And that's fine as far as it goes. However, there's more information than just whether they're working. Somebody could have a rental collection. The wife could have a rental collection. She could be on the sex offender registry. You don't know. You need to find that information out about every person who's going to be an adult in your property.
One of the things Ian and I talk about is making sure our lease says that, and I've got some property over here by Emory University, so it's not unusual for us to have like nursing students or medical students that will share, because I know they're going to be there for 3 years, and they're very, very busy, so they don't cause too much trouble. But my lease says that every resident is each and severally liable for the entire rent every month. Do you recommend that?
John, I defer to you 100% on the lease because you've got your killer lease and you have been very effective over the years. So I completely defer to you on that.
Well, I just think it's important for a tenant not to get the idea that, oh, I'm only responsible for my half.
Right.
And if I leave, then the other guy will only have to pay half. Or if my buddy leaves, I'm only going to have to pay half. That's not the way it works. I can't call the mortgage company and say, well, my roommate moved out in the rental property, so I'm only going to pay the mortgage company half this month. I'd love to try that sometime.
Let me know how that goes for you, John.
I will. I'll share that. Don't offer acceptance without a completed and signed rental application. This seems odd to me because I can't imagine that somebody would offer acceptance and say, oh yeah, you're in, you're good, even though they didn't have a completed and signed app. Do some people do that?
Oh my gosh, the stories that we've heard, especially right now, rental property is a very scarce resource. Our clients are getting multiple applications every time they put a property up. And people who have something to hide will offer extra rent or additional cash in lieu of being screened. And we never recommend that they do that. You need to treat all of your applicants fairly and consistently. And if your policy is, as it should be, that in order to rent this property, I need the following: a completed and signed application, picture ID, whatever your policy is, you need to apply it to all of your applicants and not make exceptions like that.
Got it.
And I think something you said about that, and I appreciate everything that you guys are saying. One thing I've learned about landlording and especially tenant screening is there's a lot of mental. And what I mean by that is I used to be afraid to pry into people's business because I was trained to be polite. But what I've found out is if I stay legal and ask the right questions, I am allowed to ask for more information. And if I don't ask for that information, I'm even breaking the law because I've done it differently with somebody else. So I have to be complete and thorough. One thing I appreciate about National Tenant Network, going back couple of slides here to the people. I used to call Cheryl, and I thought Cheryl was the only one I could talk to. I got to the point where any one of her staff I can call, I'm going to get a great answer. I don't need Cheryl. And I felt very comfortable, like I got the right information and that's what I needed. I also wanted to say one more thing is that one of the things I do that Cheryl has taught me very well is I assume that they're going to do a fair housing claim. And I actually have to go into an appointment. So I have to say this, that I had a problem, didn't come anywhere close to court, thanks to Cheryl and some other guidance from people and the Landlord Survival Guide. But I was very scared and I very much had to make big changes, but I did get through it. But the point is that learning all that, I assume that they're going to get on their app, get on their phone and do a fair housing claim. So I need to already know that's going to happen. And I tell them, I don't go into detail. I just say, you have a phone, you have an attorney. I got to do everything by the book. And it works because recognizing the problem is half the solution. I do want to apologize, though. I do have to get into this appointment.
No worries, Ian. Thank you. Great advice as always. And you check back in with us. So, hey, we're glad to get him out of here, Cheryl, because now we can really have some fun. So number 7 here says, don't make comments on the application or in the written record other than those relevant to your rental criteria. Here's the question. If somebody later, if their attorney gets hold of an application in court in discovery and finds that somebody's written hardly speaks English, that's not a good sign, is it?
No, because again, you want to make sure that you're basing your decision on facts. You're not looking for a new best friend. You're not looking for somebody who, does or does not wear your pink turban. You're looking for someone who's going to pay the rent on time, take care of your property, and honor the terms of your lease. So they may be somebody you like personally, or they may be somebody you don't. It doesn't matter. You set your rental criteria. You let your applicants know right up front what it's going to take to live in your property, and they decide whether they're going to apply. You screen them and you make your decision based on facts.
Very good. And I think the consistency there is what is so helpful to especially landlords that don't do this every day. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we don't. I mean, how many mom and pop landlords do we have out there that have 1, 2, maybe 3 rental properties? And some of them may have a tenant who's been there for 5 or 10 years. So, I mean, I had a tenant stay with me 26 years. This guy bought the house for me.
Literally.
Yeah. I loved it. I mean, if he'd call today, I'd rent it to him. So, all right. And I always say the greatest investment in the world is not real estate. It's you. I always tell people, you've got, God gave us the most wonderful computer right between our ears, and it's up to us to feed it and learn. It's a great investment. So I tell people to have an education budget every year. Now, let's talk for a second about storing documentation. Okay. And I had read that an administrative agency like HUD, and this is where it's easiest for an applicant who's denied to initiate an investigation. They call HUD and say, hey, I was turned down because I'm from Mars. And you told me I couldn't be turned down because I'm from Mars, and this guy did. Is there any charge to the person making these claims? Do they have to pay for anything?
Not at all. HUD will take housing complaints online. They'll take them by phone. They have testers out there looking to see if people are behaving, landlords are behaving in a discriminatory manner. So again, fair and consistent documentation. In reference to your slide, yes, HUD can come back to you in about a year. And this is why keeping good documentation is so important. I don't know where I was a year ago. I don't know who applied for rental property. So you've got to keep track of that. And it is just as important to keep track of the applicants you reject as it is to keep track of the applicants you accept. Because this way you can show that when you encounter a certain situation, you always reject that applicant. It's
Right.
not a discriminatory issue. Anytime you encounter a, say, unpaid apartment collection, you always reject that applicant. And if you have documentation showing a history of that, you'll be fine.
Cheryl, I'm assuming that going beyond that, if the applicant who is denied tenancy decides to go on their own to state court or even to federal court, that is a much more expensive and much more involved process. Is that your understanding?
Oh, I would assume so. I'm not an attorney, but again, as we talked about a few minutes ago, anyone can sue anyone for anything, whether there's any validity to it or not. And if you're a good landlord with proper documentation, you can prove that there's not.
Well, that's why we're here, is to talk about that. You've got a great name, Cheryl Nydam, and I've got a boring name, John Adams. I can't tell you how many John Adamses there are in the Atlanta phone book. I mean, there's lots, and I get a lot of phone calls every time I go to a loan origination in my name. They have maybe half a dozen name affidavits that I have to sign that says John Adams is not the same as Johnny Lee Adams,
Right.
who owes $130,000 to Grady Memorial Hospital or something like that. Do you come across that same problem of name duplications as you're running these applications?
Oh, of course. And FYI, there's at least 2 other Cheryl Nydams. So
That's a surprise.
Here's the thing, no matter how uncommon you think your name is, there is probably someone else with that same name. So yes, you've got to be very careful. And as a consumer reporting agency under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, it is absolutely our obligation to make sure that we provide information that's of benefit to the consumer. We have to give the rule, the rule of doubt to the consumer. So we have to provide documentation when we find a dispossessory name match that is that John Adams and not you, for example.
Just to throw a real loop into the system, my dad has gone to his reward now, but when he was alive, he was John L. Adams Sr., I was John L. Adams Jr., and we both lived in Decatur, Georgia.
There you go.
There was a lot of confusion. So
yeah,
but I was always proud to have his name and still am. So much for that. And then number 10, document your professional behavior. Most people that are listening or watching us right now, Cheryl, do not do an online, they don't have an online operation. Obviously the big outfits do, but if you're a mom and pop and you've got, 10 or fewer units, you may very well still be just printing out the pieces of paper you need, having the people fill them out, sign them, and give them to you. Is there anything inherently wrong with that?
I don't think so. And in some ways it's beneficial. You have an actual physical signature versus a typed signature or DocuSign, which, there's a degree of verification that's gone into a DocuSign signature, but anyone can type your name on an application.
Sure.
If something is filled out by hand, you have a wet signature. So you've got that. But you're right. It is really important to make things easy for people to apply, but you still have to make sure you get everything you need. Picture ID, pay stubs, bank statements, a completed signed application. We can't run anything in our office without a signature release.
I understand. Well, I think folks would do well to contact you if somebody is trying to learn more about screening, and they may not be ready to hire a particular credit agency like yours, can they still give you a call and just maybe ask a question or try to get some guidance and direction? Do y'all ever just help people out of the blue?
Absolutely. In fact, that's my favorite part. And that's why I really appreciated you inviting me on your show today, because it is vitally important to educate landlords and help them understand what their responsibilities are. We have a little booklet that it's called 8 Steps to Successful Resident Screening. Be glad to send it to any of your listeners who would be interested in receiving that. Just give me a call, shoot me an email, let me know, I'll send it out.
Well, fantastic. Right now on the screen, I've got your telephone number. It's 770-517-3456. I've got your email address. And Ian Robbins is the one who said y'all were capable, knowledgeable, and helpful. So Cheryl Nydam at the National Tenant Network, Georgia, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it more than you know.
Well, thank you for inviting me, John. And if you ever need me back, you just let me know.
Fantastic. We'll do it again soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.